I find it tragic that corporate power has so thoroughly beaten down artists that we now debase our own art by calling it content. What a cold word, content. What a diabolical dysphomism. People who should think of themselves as artists, with all the responsibilities that entails, instead think of themselves as content creators. Because the job of an artist is to show you new ways of being, to challenge orthodoxy, to push boundaries. The job of the content creator is to distract you, to reinforce orthodoxy, to maintain boundaries. This video is not content, it's art. Is it good art? Is it bad art? That's up to you. The artists can't control how their art is perceived, but they can control whether or not it is honest. The content creator is dishonest by default because all things within their toolbox of distraction are designed to serve one master: the algorithm. The content creator doesn't seek to reveal truths or challenge perceptions. They seek to appease a faceless machine, to engineer engagement through calculated manipulation. Every thumbnail, every caption, every trend followed is a concession to the system, a surrender of individuality for the promise of visibility. The irony, of course, is that in the process of becoming visible, the content creator must first erase themselves. So what is truly seen? By the time they scale the algorithmic peaks, it's not really them at the top, is it? Merely a reflection of what the system demands. The edges sanded down, the fire extinguished, the soul hollowed out and replaced with metric-approved mimicry. Hey guys, it's me! Content creator. I'm here to spew some generic talking points you've heard a million times before. I'm here to go along with the crowd and reinforce the mob mentality. Sure hope it doesn't come for me one day. What remains is a caricature of creativity, bright, polished, and utterly empty. The content creator asks, what do they want to see? What do they want to see? The artist, on the other hand, asks, what do I need to say? Let's talk about another way the system uses art to perpetuate itself. We need to add a little concept to our lexicons, all right? The concept of pseudo-subversion. What is that? Well, let's say there's a very disgruntled person, someone very dissatisfied with the status quo. And they think to themselves every day, man, I sure wish I could overthrow the system. I sure wish I could overthrow the system. Oh. What does the system do to that person? Does it crush them? No. Does it tell them they're not even allowed to think such things? Heresy, heresy. No. You know what it does? It sells them a movie or a video game or a novel about the person who overthrows the system. Ooh. Sells them V for Vendetta, sells them Star Wars, sells them the first Todd Phillips Joker, sells them BioShock, sells them the Hunger Games. It wraps their dissatisfaction in a neat little package. Puts a pretty bow on it. Complete with a compelling protagonist. But not so compelling that they can't just cast themselves right onto it. Hands them back the hero's journey as a product, That is pseudo-subversion, the illusion of rebellion commodified into something safe and profitable and ultimately inert. Doesn't challenge the system, it reinforces it by turning the desire for change into a consumer experience. The revolutionary spirit is anesthetized, not by suppression, but by overstimulation. The system doesn't fear dissatisfaction, it fears action. And so it channels dissatisfaction into pseudo-subversive narratives, allowing people to feel as though they've engaged in resistance when all they've done is consume another fucking product. They feel empowered as they identify with the hero who fights against tyranny, but when the credits roll, or the book closes, or the game is done, they've accomplished nothing. Their anger has been vented, their energy dissipated, and the system remains, let me check, yep, still intact. I find it very amusing when people tell me that Trump will bring fascism to America. Well, what do they imagine this fascism's going to be like? Will we be curtailed from saying what we want to say? Oh no. Will the police be able to just bust down our doors and murder us with impunity? Perish the thought. Will we be able to have the highest per capita prison population on the face of the earth? Uh-oh. Oh, what about this far-fetched notion? Will we become a militaristic oligarchy where power is concentrated into the hands of a very select elite few? Will that happen, you think? When Trump's in power? Because wow, what a change of pace that would be, huh? The truth is that whether the term fascism specifically applies or not, and I'm not here to play semantics games, we've been living under authoritarianism all along in America. Think about it. They control everything that matters, don't they? They control the media narratives that shape public opinion. They control the economic systems that keep most people in a state of perpetual precarity, scrambling to survive while the wealthiest grow ever richer. They control the political discourse, funneling every debate into pre-approved channels that serve their interests. They even control how we perceive freedom itself, convincing us that the ability to choose between two flavors of the same corruption constitutes liberty. What people fear Trump might do is, in many ways, just an extension or an intensification of what's already in place. Surveillance? That's already here. Edward Snowden, anyone? The government monitors our communications, monitors our movements, even our thoughts, through the algorithms of social media. Police violence? Hey, does the name George Floyd ring any bells? It's not some dystopian future, guys. It's a daily reality for countless Americans. All of them, really, except for the rich. I mean, sure, it disproportionately targets the most marginalized among us, but really we're all marginalized unless you have an illionaire after your name, whether it be a Bill or a Mill. Power concentrated in the hands of a few. I mean, the billionaire class effectively runs the country, wielding more influence than any elected official ever could. The real tragedy is not that authoritarianism might come to America, it's that it's been here all along, thinly camouflaged by a veneer of democracy, freedom. The outrage at the supposed impending doom of fascism under Trump is misplaced. The system doesn't change fundamentally based on which figurehead sits at the top of it. The oligarchy remains. The wars continue. The prisons stay full. The wealth gap. Oh, is it shrinking? Look at it shrinking. No, it's growing. You don't even own or control your own body in this country. Abortion rights, under attack. Trans rights, under attack. Drug rights don't even exist. You're not entitled to the fruits of your labor. And in most states, you don't even have the right to end your life with dignity in the case of the need arising. Your womb, state property. Your genitals, your hormones, state property. Your brain, state property. Your labor, corporate property. And your very existence, state property. Ooh, yeah, some fucking land of the free, eh? The oligarchy gives you only meaningless freedoms, meaningless choice. I'll let George Carlin explain.
You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice.
I'd like to expand a little on what George was saying. My wife Chelsea remarked earlier that there is so much vying for one's attention in New York City's Times Square that nothing really stands out. Everything is so loud and garish that it all just becomes, in the words of Tool's Maynard James Keenan, one great big festering neon distraction. Now, Maynard was talking about LA, but it applies equally to New York, and, really it applies to much of America and much of the rest of the world as well. I call this the camouflage of chaos. Everything is screaming so loud that you can't make anything out. It might as well be white noise. It might as well be silence, but with one key difference. It's an unbreakable silence, because in true silence, if you speak, you can be heard. But in this cacophony, if you speak, your words are lost in the din. I see this all the time. I make videos, and I try to say things in my videos. Maybe what I say is profound. Maybe it's stupid. Maybe it's a mix. Maybe it's somewhere in between. Whatever the case may be, I speak to you. And yet when I read the comments where you have the option to speak back, I can tell it's only a tiny little itty-bitty fraction of you that actually listens to a goddamn word. And that saddens me. It doesn't sadden me for my own sake. It saddens me for you. It saddens me that you think so little of yourself that you can only respond to things in the most superficial and banal manner possible. But there's an amusement there too, because there are so many content creators on this platform and countless others that love to masturbate to their viewership metrics. Oh, 1 million people heard what I had to say. Did they? Or were you just noise? Were you just something on in the background while they divided their attention between their various other little pursuits? One distraction among many. So when I see that I had a video and it got 20,000 views, I don't think of that as 20,000 people listened to me. I think of that as 20 people listened to me. And 19,980 people heard the sound of my voice. In 2021, a YouGov survey of US teens aged 13 to 17 found that 11% of males and 6% of females listed their dream job as YouTuber/streamer. Other popular answers that drew my eye were musician, artist, actor. There's a lot of young people in this country who want a job where they can express themselves. And it's sad to think about, because most of them will end up in far less fulfilling jobs, and those who do attain the dream will be socially and algorithmically herded into overt or de facto conformity enforcers, whose primary function within this culture will be to reinforce the status quo. The platforms they rely on, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, they don't reward true self-expression or boundary-pushing art. They reward consistency. Bam, bam. Bam, marketability, gotta make that money. Adherence to trends, everybody follow the trend. Where is it going? Oh, off a cliff? Whee! Those who stray too far from the algorithm's preferences, find themselves buried, their work unseen and unrewarded. Even the dreamers who succeed in clawing their way into having a little sliver of visibility in this world, they are reshaped by the system. They are subtly or not so subtly pressured to make their work more palatable, more digestible, more profitable. The rebellious artist becomes the sanitized brand. The revolutionary thinker becomes the quirky entertainer. The creative spark that drove them is replaced by a compulsion to produce, to optimize, to stay relevant. I must be relevant, yes! In a relentless race for the only true currency on this kind of platform, attention. Give me attention, please, look at me. Talk about me, think about me. And I know, by the way, that many of you are cringing every time I reference the system. I know how that sounds to you. I know it feels vague, reductive, cliche. The system, man. Rings like the catchphrase of every half-baked conspiracy theorist, or the hollow lament of every college freshman after their first sociology class. I get it. Feels like a shortcut, a lazy stand-in for a more precise critique. But let me assure you, the term is not meant to obscure, it's meant to encompass, okay? When I say the system, I'm talking about the interconnected web of economic, political, cultural, and social forces that dictate the conditions of our lives. Not some shadowy cabal pulling strings in the dark. It's a collective inertia of institutions, ideologies, and power structures that shape the world we live in. It's the way corporations prioritize profit over people. It's the way governments wield power to maintain the status quo. It's the way culture enforces norms and stifles dissent under the guise of entertainment and morality. And who benefits from you cringing at the very mention of the system? Guess who? The system. The system loves to turn criticism of itself into one big joke. You hear that guy talking about how the system's oppressing us? Grow up, loser, fucking hippie. That's another way it deals with dissent. If it can't commodify it, it ridicules it. It reduces genuine critique to a meme, a punchline, a caricature. The activist becomes the angry hippie. Get out of here, you damn hippie. The systemic critique becomes the rant of the tinfoil hat wearing it's all a conspiracy. Oh. The system doesn't need to silence dissent outright when it can sanitize it and sell it, or trivialize it into irrelevance. Everything in this country is commodified. Your attention is commodified. Your anger about your attention being commodified is commodified. I like to switch gears a bit here at this point in the sermon. I recently became aware of a quotation from Carl Jung that fascinated me. He said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Now, Jung was not talking about a literal heaven and hell. He was saying that one cannot achieve their greatest aspirations without first facing their own darkness. I've been using heaven and hell conceptually in my videos a lot for this last month, and I wanted to discuss them a little more deeply, discuss my usage of them. I wanted to start with a statement that I hold true, which is, we cannot create outside of desire. What does that mean? That means that everything that comes forth from our imaginations is something that we desire to exist. But let's not mix motivation and desire here, all right? The motivation for creating heaven and hell was control. Heaven is the carrot, hell is the stick. It's not complicated. You tell someone that they can go to eternal paradise if they obey you, they're likely to obey you. You tell them they're going to go to eternal torment if they disobey you, they're likely to obey you. That's the motivation for the creative act of heaven and hell. But why do people believe in those things in the first place? It's because they desire for them to be true. I think it's obvious why people desire heaven. Its appeal is self-evident. But what of hell? Why did human beings create hell? I think there are multiple reasons. First, hell satisfies a very human craving for justice, or more accurately, vengeance. The world is chaotic, the world is unfair, and people have always struggled with the idea that bad deeds might go unpunished, so hell offers the ultimate resolution. No sin goes unaccounted for. No wrongdoer escapes retribution. It's an idea born from our collective frustration with the moral ambiguity of life. It feeds our desire for certainty, for cosmic order, for a universe where the score is always ultimately settled. Whew! Don't have to worry. They're going to go to hell. Second, hell is a testament to our fascination with suffering. Because whether we admit it or not, human beings are drawn to stories of pain, conflict, and punishment. We find hell compelling because it reflects something innate in us, a morbid curiosity about the boundaries of endurance, the nature of suffering, and the consequences of our actions. Third, hell exists because it completes the duality of heaven. Without hell, heaven would lose some of its power. Its perfection would be a little less compelling if it wasn't contrasted against the opposite. Hell is the shadow that makes heaven's light shine brighter. It creates the stakes, the tension, the urgency to strive for good and avoid bad. Lastly, hell is a reflection of the darkness within all of us, which is exactly how Jung was using it in his quote earlier. And think how much more vivid the descriptions of hell are than the descriptions of heaven. Mark Twain noticed this in his essay, Letters from the Earth, where he pointed out the stark contrast between heaven and hell. Twain observed that hell is described with meticulous, gruesome detail, endless fire, gnashing of teeth, demons gnawing at your skin, the devil's up there with a pitchfork, die, be tortured forever. Torturous punishments tailored to every sin imaginable. Heaven, on the other hand, just, clouds and harps? I don't know. Why is that? Why is hell so vivid and heaven so vague? Well, Twain suggested that hell is much more vivid because it reflects the parts of ourselves that we know all too well. The rage, the jealousy, the lust, the greed. These are tangible, relatable, even intimate aspects of the human condition. They make for good storytelling because they resonate deeply with our lived experience. Heaven, by contrast, that's an ideal. It's abstract, it's alien. It's so far removed from the messiness of our everyday lives that it's almost impossible for our minds to imagine. It doesn't have the same visceral pull, okay? So what I'm talking about when I say heaven and hell, I'm talking about realms of human imagination, realms of human desire. And I made criticisms of these creations. Hell might be more vividly imagined than heaven, but to my way of thinking, both realms are banal. Both realms are tedious. They hold appeal here on earth only because of their novelty. There is a thrill to them, a sort of anticipation. They give us a sense of cosmic stakes. Where will my eternal soul go? Will it experience eternal bliss? I'm in heaven! Ooh. Or will it experience eternal pain? Oh, God! But once you're in heaven or hell, wouldn't take long at all to see that they're pretty boring places, right? I mean, heaven is stagnant perfection, devoid of conflict, growth, or change. And without struggle, I'm sorry, but joy loses meaning. Hell, though vividly imagined, is equally stagnant, endless suffering without purpose, pain dulled by monotony. Both realms lack the complexity and unpredictability that make life actually interesting. When I talk about heaven and hell, I'm speaking of the aspirational and the primal. I'm talking about the higher self and the lower self. And the point I want to impress upon you is that the dichotomy, though psychologically fascinating, is largely illusory. That's why I love Jung's quotation so much. I'll even repeat it. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The dichotomy of heaven and hell is a product of human imagination, an attempt to simplify the complexity of existence into moral absolutes. But guess what? Life doesn't work that way. Growth comes from embracing the messy interplay between light and shadow, the aspirational and the primal, rather than trying to separate them. Now, if you're a Taoist, like my friend Paul, you probably have a major leg up on grasping this concept. The yin-yang symbol is a perfect representation of this interplay. It shows us that light and shadow are not opposites in conflict, but complementary forces that define and enhance one another. Within the dark swirl of yin lies a seed of light, and within the bright swirl of yang lies a seed of darkness. One cannot exist without the other. They are forever intertwined, in balance, and in motion. When you look at the social interplay of this country, especially as it plays out in our various forms of media, be they mainstream, independent, or social, we see this Abrahamic hyperduality really tainting things. For example, in our political discourse, everything is framed as a battle of good versus evil, Democrats versus Republicans, left versus right. Every issue is polarized to the point where nuance and complexity and compromise are lost. You're either a saint or a villain. And there's no room for humanity in between. This hyperduality infects how we think, how we argue, how we create. Consider entertainment. Our stories often center on a clear hero and a clear villain with little space in between for morally ambiguous characters or unresolved endings. Superhero movies, for instance, thrive on the simplistic duality. The hero is pure, the villain is evil. The resolution is always the triumph of good. Even when complexity is attempted, it's often still boxed into this binary framework. On social media, the duality manifests as the endless cycle of call-outs, cancellation, how people are judged as either irredeemably bad or perfectly righteous, with no allowance for growth, no allowance for context, no allowance for redemption. Subjects that require contemplative and thoughtful responses are boiled down to shitty hot takes, stripping away the nuance of real conversation and turning every issue into a black and white battle between good and evil, or two competing ideas of good, really, if you want to get down to it. But let's bring it back to where we started, the concept of the content creator. The concept of art as a tool of the system to perpetuate its own power, because the content creator is an outcropping of social media, and thus the content created is often a mirror of social media. Thus it often represents the flattening of complex and messy truths into digestible, marketable binaries, baby! Just as nuanced conversations are reduced to hot takes, art is reduced to content. Palatable, profitable, empty, baby, empty. If you're a creative of any stripe, be that a musician, an actor, a streamer, a painter, a filmmaker, a novelist, whatever, you're gonna find that there is a tremendous pressure on you to bring your views in line with the prevailing norms of the system. The pressure won't always be overt, it rarely is. Instead, it comes through subtle incentives and disincentives. The algorithm rewards what is safe and marketable and punishes what is controversial and difficult and unorthodox. The platforms that you rely on to reach an audience will gently nudge you again and again towards conformity. You'll be told, read the room. You'll be told, avoid topics that might alienate your audience. You'll be urged to chase the trends rather than carve your own path. You'll hear whispers that certain things just don't sell, that certain ideas are just bad for business. And over time, this chorus can wear you down. Without even realizing it, you may start to tailor your work to fit the mold, to stay within the invisible boundaries that the system enforces. The tragedy of this is profound. Creativity is supposed to be a force of disruption, a way to question, to challenge, reimagine the world. But the system takes this force and neutralizes it. It makes you complicit in its maintenance. Your art, which should be a reflection of your own unique perspective, becomes just another little cog in the machine, designed to distract rather than provoke, to pacify rather than awaken. The system doesn't need to censor you. It just needs to incentivize your obedience. As a creative, your heaven is fame, and your hell is obscurity. That's how you are controlled. That's how you are brought in line. It's important to understand that humans perpetuate narratives, sure, but narratives also perpetuate humans. Because we are all most certainly mortal, but we strive for immortality. And fantasies of afterlives are not the only way we do this. We also have a sort of pseudo-immortality that we associate with our sense of continuity, our associative continuity. In other words, we're not only interested in the concept of eternal life, but also in the concept of living on in the collective mind, the zeitgeist of humanity itself. For the artist, this pull is particularly powerful. Blade Runner was a flop when it was released, but its influence on sci-fi is enormous to this day. Maybe it did not speak to the largest number of people, but the people it did speak to, it spoke to deeply and profoundly. It embedded itself into the collective imagination of humanity. It became a seed, a touchstone, a reference point for countless other works of art and ideas. That's the power of associative continuity for the artist. Not just to create something that entertains or distracts, but to create something that resonates, something that ripples through time, even if its impact is not immediately felt. Blade Runner's initial failure at the box office did not diminish its ultimate legacy. And I use that as a reminder that art's true value is not measured in immediate metrics. It's measured in its ability to shape the cultural consciousness, to inspire others, to plant ideas that grow and evolve. Even if you're not a fan of Blade Runner, you're probably a fan of one of the works it inspired in some way, and that's what cements legacy. That's true influence. Influence is not the ability to motivate people to buy a fucking beverage. It's the ability to motivate people to see the entire world through a different cognitive lens. Now let me make a few things clear. Am I saying that all art has to be this lofty, self-important meditation on the meaning of life or some edgy, nihilistic, burn the world down work of transgression? No, of course not. Art can be light, art can be silly, art can be whatever it wants to be, and it can still be meaningful. What I am saying is that art that carries with it a sense of authenticity has a better chance of being impactful and resonant than some carefully calculated piece of pandering, people-pleasing pap. Art created by a committee, or by calculation, or by machine learning is rarely going to reach into people's souls and show them something new, because this sort of art all operates on the same basic premise. We take elements that people liked before and combine them in safe and predictable ways. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't necessarily always create bad art, but it's very hard to create great art that way. And very rarely is great art the goal of such endeavors in the first place. The other thing I wanted to say is that in any artistic endeavor, no matter how genuine or authentic or talented you are, no matter how industrious and consistent you are, no matter what you bring to the table, you are never guaranteed success in the sense of achieving fame or wealth or any of those things. So creating with those goals in mind is usually a recipe for disappointment. You create for you. That doesn't mean you ignore the audience. That doesn't mean you set aside all consideration of them. In many aspects of art, that's not even possible to do. This is an example of a fucking art form where you can't really do that. Or performing music live or stand-up comedy. When I say you create for you, what that means is that you create what you see as missing. You ask yourself, what do I want to say? Before you ask yourself, what do they want to hear? It's better for them to genuinely and passionately hate you than to superficially love you. Because in the former scenario, they're engaging meaningfully, and in the latter scenario, they are engaging mindlessly. And I know it's tough to pay the bills with art. If someone rises to the top of an art form commercially, they do get rich and famous usually. And sometimes that's based on skill and sometimes it's not. But whatever the case may be, it's very alluring to try and emulate these models as a blueprint for your own vision of success. Because we can talk about artistic integrity all day long, but we all want money. We all want influence, with very few exceptions. And I don't want to leave you with some overly lofty ideas on this subject, so let me just say this. I think it's fine to dream about those things, but let's be real. You stand very little chance of achieving those things. And the dream that you will is used as a shackle to confine you into a prison of mediocrity. And a lot of times, even if you do achieve the success you're after, you'll just become a grand mediocrity, a spectacle of empty bullshit. The commercial aspects of a work should be, at best, the third place consideration. The first place should be, is this honest? Does this reflect me? Does this say what I want to say? The second consideration should be the audience. Will they understand it? How will they understand it? What will it say to them? The third consideration can be commercial viability, but honestly, I think you're actually more likely to achieve commercial viability if you don't strive for it, or only strive for it after the work is created. With all apologies to Bill Hicks, how you market your work matters. You create a beautiful, haunting masterpiece on the cello, it's probably not going to do much if you play it in front of a crowd of drunk rednecks at a hoedown, okay? Nothing against drunk rednecks at a hoedown, by the way. I'm not being snobby here. I'm just saying they're probably not the audience for that. And if you create something that's dark and twisted, you probably want to market it to people who like such things. If you create something cute and funny, same deal. The point is, create first, market second. Don't bake the marketing into the thing itself, because that compromises it. That fills it with decisions that are not reflective of you as an artist, but are instead reflective of some attempt to play the market. Let your work be what it is. Let it reflect you honestly. Let it be the product of your mind and your emotions and what you have to say. Let it be authentic. Let it be real. Because there's already plenty of tepid horse shit with no soul kicking around. We're all full up on that.
If you enjoyed today's sermon, then do what you must. Subscribe to this channel. Click the link in the description to diagnose various forms of madness and leave an intelligent comment below. Go forth bathed in adoration, you beautiful creature.